Can you imagine a time when our ancestors communicated their deepest fears and triumphs, not with words, but through vivid hand gestures and tones around a campfire? A time when the anxiety of going hungry and the thrill of survival were conveyed without PowerPoint or cell phones, but through the raw intensity of human connection. How did these ancient storytellers teach us the power of empathy and shared experiences? And what can we learn from them to cultivate an egalitarian relationship? Our Paleolithic ancestors experienced a relative egalitarian existence because whether they were child-rearing, gathering berries and leafy greens, or hunting, they were mutually interdependent upon each other. All members' contributions were considered of equal value. Relationships were egalitarian because of this mutual interdependence. Relative gender equality was experienced. They did not accumulate wealth or resources. When people learned how to nurture plants, instead of simply collecting them, they also learned to capture animals, breed them, and domesticate them, rather than hunt them. This required a lot less energy from humans and freed them up for other things. Over the centuries, this has led to the development of agriculture, which led to a significant growth in population. As a result, the concept of ownership developed along with the anxieties that rendered competition for the best land to cultivate crops and herd livestock. The impact of this shift from hunting and gathering to agriculture led to the accumulation of resources. Accumulation of resources by a select few led to unequal distribution and economic inequities amongst other members of society. These inequities created anxieties that were a catalyst for utilitarian relationships based on need rather than want. These practices are still in effect today, despite our technological advances and abundance, with people seeking partners with greater abundance because their talents and contributions are undervalued. Social inequalities and exploitation also ensued, along with associating gender with the value of societal contributions. The value of contributions associated with the feminine gender was lowered, rendering people of a feminine gender dependent on the masculine gender for basic survival. Now that land is property belonging to another human, we can no longer forage for our own berries for survival because that would be considered theft. We are compelled to seek utilitarian relationships and alliances because we are no longer able to gather our own berries for survival. Have we surrendered the authenticity of human connection, trading genuine bonds for utilitarian relationships simply because the age-old act of gathering our own berries for survival has been replaced by a world driven by convenience and compromise? This disparity in perceived value of contributions led to relationships between partners becoming dependent on one another for perceived needs rather than egalitarian mutual want or a shared emotional connection. Though humans were no longer being chased by saber-toothed tigers, the advent of agriculture brought other anxieties. Property ownership and protection of resource accumulation was of great concern. With property ownership came patriarchal anxieties over inheritance, which led to the domination of one sex over another and even landowner over laborer. With agriculture, we were still anxiety-based, with those anxieties rooted in fear of paternity, as now we had to concern ourselves with land inheritance. Goals shifted from daily hunter-gatherer tasks to property accrual for cultivation. Cultivation of land led to accumulation, and of course, property ownership, then competition for resources. As we fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, both men and women came off the land they were working and into the factories. Men, women, and children had to adjust to a stark contrast in daily routines. They were no longer working to the natural rhythms of the Earth's seasons and sunrises, but rather clocking in as the whistle blew to take orders from someone else. Both men and women were stripped of social value. Furthermore, they were subjected to physical and psychological threats by factory managers if they did not adhere to the factory's rules regarding absenteeism and tardiness. Again, we see the theme of anxiety-driven motivators. Keep in mind that at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, most places did not have HR departments that regulated the treatment of workers. Conditions were oppressive, with people risking physical injury, including loss of limbs, if not their lives, with a multitude of threats they were constantly exposed to. People were not psychologically safe, able to work at their own pace, or take breaks if they were not feeling well. Factories rendered mass production of goods for maximum profit, but at the cost of the time and toil of the men and the women who worked in them. Because family structures changed, with the social expectation being that of a nuclear family, no longer did multiple generations live under the same roof. Although there was a shift in social expectation for women to remain in the domestic sphere, with domestic work being increasingly devalued, if you were an unmarried woman, it was nearly impossible to remain at home without working. Unmarried women were expected to support themselves by taking low-wage factory jobs or taking a job in domestic service for another family. Because domestic work was associated with the feminine gender, it was considered of lower value and hence lower pay. The problem with this dynamic is that it was almost impossible for a woman to be single and support herself on the lower wages. Working class men generally made lower wages as well and could not support an entire family on their own. This created a plethora of problems, resulting in men and women forming utilitarian relationships or alliances in the guise of marriage and relationships. Even with both partners having to pull wages to support a household and family, the partner who brought home the most financially had the most power and the final say in major decisions. A utilitarian relationship is anxiety-based. A utilitarian relationship is driven by financial and material need. A utilitarian relationship is anxiety-based because of the element of need, as in survival mode. An egalitarian relationship is one driven by mutual desire. In other words, two partners mutually desire to be with each other, and there is nothing to be gained materialistically from either partner because resources are abundant or available for both individuals, whether they choose to remain together or eventually part ways. Not all utilitarian relationships are bad. If both partners are happy, open, and honest with their arrangement, and no one is harmed physically or psychologically, then people have that right. However, wouldn't you rather be wanted than needed? The problem with utilitarian relationships became more evident with the rise of criminal domestic violence rates skyrocketing upon the quarantine that resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic. During the quarantine of 2020, people discovered that they did not like their partners. Before the quarantine, people had a buffer routine where they could diffuse from the workday during the drive home or stop by their favorite spot during happy hour. They could go grocery shopping for dinner items or work out at the gym. Partners generally spent limited amounts of their day with each other. Keep in mind that sleep does not count as time spent together because partners are not actively interacting or engaged with each other. If we assume most people get at least 7 hours of sleep during a 24-hour cycle, the jump in direct time spent together increased dramatically. Even if partners were previously amicable with each other during their interactions, the constant one-on-one time of being confined to a residential space or property led to increased interaction and unavoidable communication, including nonverbal communication. A phenomenon referred to as the shadow pandemic by the United Nations served as a wake-up call as to what is really going on with our societal structure regarding relationship dynamics. Why are people with each other if they're going to escalate to violence? People crave time with their loved ones in the form of vacations, dining out, and sometimes just togetherness spent at home. If we crave time with our partners, then why did so many get hurt by them during this time of togetherness? That's not love, that's need. The financially dependent partner is beholden to the decisions made by the partner bringing in the most income. Partners who make more financial contributions will usually use that as a basis for making most of the important decisions regarding the household and child rearing. The partner with the greatest financial abundance has the most power, leading to inequity and discontent. Following the lockdown of 2020, a report issued in 2021 by the United Nations from which the American Journal of Emergency Medicine then reported that CDV incidence increased globally by 25 to 33%. I believe if most people were in egalitarian relationships, where partners wanted to be with each other rather than needed to be with each other, there would have been and would currently be fewer incidents of criminal domestic violence. Financially dependent partners find it very difficult to leave abusive relationships. In fact, women will commonly leave one abusive relationship to enter another relationship that eventually becomes abusive on some level. Additionally, children are negatively impacted by the influence of utilitarian relationships. If not witnesses to abuses, they are incidentally taught that utilitarian relationships are normal and the status quo. I came to an epiphany several years ago when former President Barack Obama passed legislation to legalize same-sex marriages. I was always disenchanted with the concept of marriage because I believed it was an antiquated carryover of one person having ownership of another in patriarchal domination. However, the epiphany occurred to me when President Obama legalized same-sex marriages. I thought to myself, hey, now that's an egalitarian relationship. That's an egalitarian marriage. And I started to change my previous ideas of the concept of marriages and other committed relationships. The legalization of same-sex marriages is what led me to consider the possibility that marriages and other committed relationships have the potential for egalitarianism. In egalitarian relationships, everyone benefits. The connection between partners who share mutual adoration toward one another is the most desirable outcome. Anxiety is alleviated because neither partner has to fear loss, A partner should not enter into a relationship with the fear of financial loss. I imagine a day when the concept of alimony or suing for half of a partner's retirement is obsolete because both partners are paid a fair wage in the first place. Then there's the issue of the uneven distribution of the world's wealth. Per Kenneth Guest in Cultural Anthropology, a toolkit for a global age, 99% of the world's resources are held by 1% of the population. Gender notwithstanding, people should be paid a living wage for their talents. When people are paid a living wage, regardless of their gender, this sets the stage for egalitarian partnerships, marriages, connections, and even egalitarian platonic friendships. I believe there is abundance to be had by all, and we need to figure out a way together to make sure the world's resources are accessible to everyone. I think we are technologically advanced enough in our society currently that we can officially move away from anxiety-based motives and focus on a purpose in life that renders enjoyment and creativity. I think every human in the world can have this and should have this. We need to do something now to ensure that generations going forward live in a society where we work together rather than against each other under the fallacious assumption that there's not enough to go around. I've personally been on the receiving end of domestic violence. For the longest time, I was ashamed to say I was in a utilitarian relationship out of more of a financial need than anything else. I perceived myself as being a talented, hard worker historically, yet could not with my earnings enjoy nor afford a residence of my own, cover utilities, basic upkeep, put food in my mouth and in the mouths of my children. I know a lot of other women have also been in this situation, and for reasons rooted in shame, are discouraged from talking about having a financial need because of social stigmas. I put myself out here in a spirit of vulnerability in hopes that anyone out there who has ever experienced the same knows that they are not alone, and they know that they are not the only one who has had these feelings and experienced the shame and the trauma. If I accomplish nothing else today but to help someone else feel better, then I've done my job here. The path to truly fulfilling relationships lies in recognizing and valuing the diverse talents and skills of all genders by dismantling the barriers that prevent fair compensation for labor. We pave the way for a future where anxiety no longer governs our relationships. Instead, we can embrace a world where abundance, happiness, and genuine connections are accessible to everyone. Let us work together to build a society where creativity flourishes, where fear and insecurity are replaced by understanding and support, and where love thrives unencumbered by societal constraints. Together, we can create a future where every individual is empowered to contribute their unique talents, leading to a world filled with fulfilling relationships and encounters, regardless of their duration. Thank you.